Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Good evening and welcome to another episode of True Story Live. It is the 17th of January. This month, this first year of 2021, it just seems to be flying by, just like time seems to flow in that direction. Always getting quicker. When I was a kid, people used to say, well, enjoy your life because when you get older, it goes fast. And darned if they weren't correct. It does seem like time goes by a lot quicker now than it did when I was a kid. So here it is, 2021. Welcome to the broadcast, and we have a great topic tonight, following up on our themes of self-discovery and talked about autonomy and dependence. And tonight we're going to discuss validation, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, I'll say hello to my panel. Always starting with my beautiful, industrious, and courageous wife, Jen. Jen, how are you this evening?
I am doing well. Doing well. Glad to be here. When you started talking about 2021, I was like, wait a minute, what's today's date? Because I was like, I thought, okay, our show last week was after the new year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was just confused.
Yeah.
But you're right. It is flying by. It's crazy.
Well, and back in the day, we used to, it seemed like we used to write it down more, and close to a new year, I would always be filling the previous year, get in the habit of doing that. But so I guess in part, I'm reminding myself what year it is, at least as far as we know. With daylight savings time, who knows? They shave time and put it back, and nobody even really knows what time it is.
I know,
it reminds me of a song from the 60s. Does anybody really know what time it is?
That's a good song.
Yeah, it's a good song. All right. We're also going to introduce one of our favorite panelists as well, and also our producer from Australia, our friend Glenn. Glenn, hello.
Good evening. How are you?
Oh, a little Transylvania stuff going on. A little
good evening, Mr. Hitchcock.
Good evening.
Yeah, you should do that voice every week.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Alfred Hitchcock. Yeah, he's
shows how old I am.
Well, I'm not quite as old as you, but I watched those in reruns. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and I remember the theme music, and he'd walk out there, and they'd have an outline of him, and he'd walk and profile and stand in the outline, and then he always did a bit at the beginning, and always talked about whatever the show was, and then he'd come back at the end. Yeah, it was a good show. Not as good as the Twilight Zone, in my opinion, but there you have it. Not really the topic for tonight, but there it is.
There it is.
Yeah. So how's everybody doing in the chat? So we'll wait and hope that more people come in. But if you're here already, we want to say hello to you. So Jen, if you would like to say hello to the peoples, please.
Definitely. It's a good night to say hello to the peoples.
It is.
Janet, hey. BB Truth is here with us. Alex, hey Alex. We've got Annette hanging out with us. Jalen Cruiser, hey Jalen. Sorry I missed you this morning on Lon's channel. I was like, where's Jalen? But she hadn't popped on yet, I don't think. Yeah. And I think that is it for right now. Am I missing anybody?
I don't think so. Okay. I think you got everybody.
All right.
Yeah, funny thing about Lon, he usually tries to be here, and then he came after the fact, and I think it was the next day at some point, and put in the comments on last week's show. He says, I'm late, but saying hello, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But I always say to him, I listen to his broadcast too, but he starts so early, and I have been getting up early for the training. I'm training for a new job, and class starts at 9 a.m., which is early for me because I'm generally a night owl. But he gets up really, really early and goes on Facebook Live and lets people know that he's doing his stream. But I listen to him after the fact. So we'll see if Lon comes in tonight. But again, I'm happy that everyone's here. I see Celine in there. There's Baby Yoda's mother. I'll say it before she does, so there's no confusion. So, guys, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate that. Tonight's topic is it's one that we feel like is very important, and it's just with all these subjects that we're talking about, a lot of them involve our self-esteem and relationships and psychology and better mental health and all those things, which seem to be kind of a running theme for the show. And we wouldn't have it any other way. These are topics. I'm not saying that no one else talks about these things. In fact, there are many channels out there that focus on tonight's subject as part of the greater subject of narcissism and relationships and things like that. So very excited about getting into this topic. And Jenn wrote tonight's write-up. I added a couple things, but it's for the most part it's her writing and her voice. I mean, of course, I'm gonna read it for us, and I did speak about myself in the first person at one portion that I added to it. But it's Jenn's baby, and we'll get into all this and talk about what it means to us, and we'll start doing that right now. So. Welcome to another great topic for us to discuss and ask questions and hopefully answer them as well. Today, we're going to talk about validation. What is validation and why is it important? What does it look like to have it? What does life look like when we don't have it? And validation, this week's inspiration comes from the song Stand By Me, as validation is being there for someone no matter what. And the link is in the description. Go click on that if you get a chance. The definition of emotional validation is the process of learning about, understanding, and expressing acceptance of another person's emotional experience. The definition of emotional invalidation is when a person's thoughts and feelings are rejected, ignored, or judged. Invalidation is emotionally upsetting for anyone, but particularly hurtful for someone who is emotionally sensitive. Invalidation disrupts relationships and creates emotional distance. The funny thing is, many people do not know what validation even is, let alone how to do it for ourselves or for another person we may be in a relationship with. Jenn and I have discussed this as a very important element in our relationship because it lets the other person know that they are being heard and understood and that what they feel is okay. We've done this for each other from the start and have learned how to do it better and better. For example, let's say you're angry about something you feel someone else has done to you. We've all been there, so think about it in your mind. You decide to talk to the person who hurt you and you tell them what happened. However, instead of validation, the person acts defensively and even goes on the attack, telling you how ridiculous your feelings are and that you're wrong. It can look like someone making excuses for what they did or said instead of validating your feelings. Does that help or hurt your relationship with them? It may seem like a silly question, but this happens all the time. In that same situation, what if instead of defensiveness and attack, the person first validated you and said they could understand why you might feel hurt? Does that seem like a better way to reach a healthy outcome than the other route? We define what validation and invalidation mean, but here we describe what it is not. Validation is not necessarily agreeing with what the person is feeling. In fact, it may not even have meant to hurt the person at all. And they may be way off in the way they feel, but validation, while not always agreeing with the reason they feel the way they do, is simply hearing them and agreeing with their right to feel what they feel. By validating, you're not dictating to someone what or how to feel. Glenn's definition of validation, he describes as this. Well, I went and asked Sandra, and she and I are on the same page. Of course, we're not to put others down, so looking at validation from several angles, I can say Americans seem way over the top on most of this stuff compared with us. And all this validation stuff is not considered or even discussed much here. Hence, I do not like the word at all because it does not represent Australian thoughts. If you said affirmation, I would see that as more a relevant word. Sandra and I agree we don't need or seek validation from anybody. We validate, as you put it, on the fly, but we also are mindful of the so called validation we hear in the USA. Seems artificial and said for the benefit of the person rather than it may not be necessarily truthful. If you bring it into my relationship with Sandra, the fact that we, out of free choice, decide to stay in the same house and together is all the validation required. Do I say to Sandra, I love you? Of course. I do, often, but not because I need to reinforce something that already exists. Do I acknowledge my kids and others in a positive way? Of course, very often. As said on the show last week, it narrows the parent/child divide. You may want to ask me to clarify, are there different kinds of validation? I think that can only be answered by each individual and what they deem as relevant to them. I think you should be asking the question, is the way you validate different or the same as the way you express love? Well, that's a great question.
Great question.
What does validation look like when we are young? How does it help us grow? Why is validation important in relationships? How does it affect its safety and growth? How does invalidation hurt important relationships? How does it affect its growth, or how does it help its demise? What is invalidation abuse? What is self-validation, and how can that be used when we've experienced a lack of validation by key people in our lives? If we are a believer, how does God validate us? That's a great question too. All right. So there's the write-up for tonight. And we're going to dive into this topic in just a moment. Just getting my screen set up a little bit better. And then we can move forward. All right. Now, I'm just going to check and see if anyone else came in so we don't miss anybody. I don't think so. All right. Oh, happy birthday, BB. I see that. It's your birthday. So, what a way to spend your birthday to come and hang out with us. That's
I know.
Great. Yeah, that's thoughtful. All right. So, I didn't look at the slides. Babe, did you add the couple questions at the beginning? Because those were just more part of the definition. We don't necessarily need to look at those.
I know the first ones that I did were the definitions.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't the questions in the first paragraph. I
Thank
jumped on
you.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll define it again. So we'll bring those up. The definition of emotional validation, so everybody can see it. I think that's a good way to start. The definition of emotional validation is the process of learning about, understanding, and expressing acceptance of another person's emotional experience. And we'll just say something very briefly, but that's a very good definition. So I added in the write-up that it's not necessarily agreeing with the other person, it's accepting the way they're expressing their emotions. And it, in my opinion, it adds to the relationship. It lets the person know that you're hearing them and that you're actively listening. That's another tool, really, in relationships, is rather than thinking in a discussion with someone you're in a relationship with, rather than thinking about the next thing you're going to say, you're actively listening to them, and validation is a way to show that, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I used to do that all the time in scuffles. They'd be talking, and in my mind I'm thinking of what I'm gonna say, how I'm gonna respond.
Sure.
That was a bad habit to break.
Well, yeah, and that happens to a lot of people. A lot of people are doing that, and it's especially, I think, you do it when you're dealing with someone that you're always on the defensive because they're a toxic person. They're attacking all the time.
Yeah.
So I think in that case, you almost feel like you have to, because otherwise you have no ammo and you're not ready when and if it becomes your turn to talk, then you're just like, yeah.
I used to take notes during some fights.
Oh, you did. I'm glad you don't have to do that with me.
I'm really glad too. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, well, we don't really have what I would consider fights. We
No.
call what we have bumps.
Bumps.
They're little bumps. It's just two people being different and maybe misunderstanding something or feeling uncomfortable with something that the other person says or does, but it doesn't
Yeah.
happen too often.
Nope.
Which I'm grateful for. Some people think that if you don't fight, then there's something wrong. Like they really do believe that fighting is a part of a relationship. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that you don't have to fight, but if you do fight, I think there are good ways to do it in a way that it's not hurtful. Invalidation is one. That's why the reason I brought that up, because in fact, Mark Gungor, he talks about this of when you're fighting, and he talks about the act of listening. And he's saying that before in a fight, you listen to the other person, and before you say anything, you kind of paraphrase what they just said. And that's another tool of letting the person know that you're hearing them.
Yeah.
In a way, that's definitely validation. And that's another.
And you kind of have to be engaged and listening in order to be able to do that.
Right. Otherwise, how could you paraphrase what someone just said if you're thinking about what you're going to say? You might not even really be hearing it, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're preparing for your next salvo, in your mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that definition. The definition of emotional invalidation, so this would be the opposite, is when a person's thoughts and feelings are rejected, ignored, or judged. Invalidation is emotionally upsetting for anyone, but particularly hurtful for someone who is emotionally sensitive. Invalidation disrupts relationships and creates emotional distance. Yeah, I can see that. So I just talked below about the scenario. Like I just use this for an example of, someone hurts you and you go to confront them or talk to them, let them know that you hurt them, which I think is a good thing. If someone hurts you and you're willing to go to them and talk to them, for me, it wouldn't be for the purpose of dressing them down, but it would be because I care about the relationship and I don't want to stuff feelings or hide my feelings. I want to bring them to the front so that we can, work through them. And so if I were to do that now with Jen, as I said in my addition to the write-up, we practice this, validating each other, showing that we're listening and letting the other person know that it's okay, however they feel, and not trying to dictate to them, well, you should feel like this, or well, your feelings are wrong. I would never do that. But for the sake of this definition, that is exactly what happens with emotional invalidation. Feelings are rejected, ignored, or judged. Now, a lot of times the ignored part is what I see the most. People just not even bothering to validate, not saying I understand you, but just moving past it. And I think that hurts the worst, in my opinion. That's what hurts the worst.
Yeah.
Judgment hurts, and rejection of feelings hurts as well. But at least for me, it seems worse if they don't even care enough about you to acknowledge that you have feelings in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good definition, in my opinion, of emotional invalidation. And in the chat, if you have, as always, if you have questions or comments, or if you have a different definition for these things, please add it, and we will see you and respond. Janet says, "You are not Italian." That Jason. Hello. Well, my mom and her siblings were very loud, yet hugged and kissed minutes later after very loud talking.
You sure that wasn't yelling?
Yeah, I'm not much of a yeller. My mom would yell sometimes, but she was more of a door
Banging
cupboard
cupboards.
slammer. She would want she would want to let you know that she was angry by making a lot of noise and stuff.
Do you think she was looking for validation for doing
Yes, I
that?
was just going to say that, Jen. I
Huh.
was just going to say, um, in her marriage with my dad, I don't think he knows how to validate at all. I'm trying to think if he's ever. No, I don't have any memory of him ever listening to something I told him and saying, well, I can understand how you would feel that way or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that he did that with her.
Hmm.
So in my opinion, and knowing what her childhood was like, she was many times ignored. She was basically used to be a surrogate mother for my uncle, for her younger brother. I know that her parents would say, "Well, your brother's upset. Go make it better. Go find out what's going on." So her feelings, if she had any, those were not acknowledged.
Yeah.
So I know, in my opinion, I feel like I know that she was not validated as a child. So of course, if that doesn't happen for you, and if you don't deal with it in some way, at least learn to validate yourself, then you're going to carry that on to any of your relationships. It's going to be a continual thing.
Yeah.
Let me ask Glenn, because Glenn was in a relationship with my mom for a while. I don't know at what point she started to learn these things about validation. I do know that she and I would have conversations about it. Now, this is something that happens. She got a lot of benefit from going to Al-Anon meetings. In the Al-Anon meetings, there is validation just in being heard and listened to. And then a lot of times, what will happen is, if I were there and I were to make a comment, then another person would raise their hand to speak next. And a lot of times, the person will reference what you just said. So it's a lot of playing off what and in a way that's validation. It's saying that someone heard
Yeah.
what you said, and then they're using it to form their narrative or their question. So I think that's one of the reasons why she gravitated toward that group and got so much healing from it, because of that reason. So, but I was going to ask Glenn. Glenn, even though your definition of validation is different, are you aware of, when you were with Linda, of any validation needing to go on between the two of you, or any element of affirmation as you see it, if you remember?
Yeah, I know. Okay. How do I put this? I think what I saw was that she was very devoid of actually having practiced a relationship with validation in it. So hence she always was very encouraging of the things like, oh, fight with me. She wanted engagement, and I think that
Yes.
backs up what you were saying. Because her premise was, if someone's prepared to fight with me, that shows they're engaged with me, and I agree 100% with that. Because if you're not interested in someone, why are you going to make the fight with them? You're not.
Right.
You'd rather
No.
walk away and go and eat an ice cream. Like, so yes, I think she was seeking it, but not in a way that the definition of validation is here. I think it was much more subtle. And of course, when you're in that relationship, you don't actually. I certainly didn't perceive it as validation. I just saw it, as I said, someone who had never. I'm not speaking badly of your dad, but she would say to me, "Look, I've never experienced a situation where I've felt validated, and that backed you up." So
Right.
why wouldn't you, particularly as a relationship therapist, want to try to experience it for yourself? Makes
Yeah.
perfect sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I asked, because what you said about her wanting to engage, wanting someone to engage with her, that describes, and I know you're not trying to talk bad about my dad, but that's exactly what I was describing in a different way. A lot of times he was just aloof. She would get all mad, and he, just by being silent or not saying much, would make her feel crazy. And that's a narcissistic tool that they use, just the silent treatment, not saying anything, not acknowledging her feelings. not acknowledging that they exist. So that makes total sense to me that she would do that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Very
And that hurts your self-worth, you know.
sure, sure, and that's the ignored part. I feel like that's the part of being ignored.
Is it? I've said this. Is it not easy to see why someone in a position like that could feel isolated, unloved? I mean, to me, it's just a no-brainer that the person who says nothing and does not engage has all the power. You have none. You're totally
Yeah.
at the mercy of the person who says no.
Yep.
Who
Yeah.
says, I refuse to discuss this. I don't want to talk about it. Where does that leave you? It leaves you just like a shag on a rock. There's
Yeah.
nowhere you can go with that. And I experienced that myself in first marriage, and it is the most emotionally debilitating experience. It's just you're just empty.
Yeah.
It's very sad. Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks.
And there's no connection. I can imagine that even people that fight, that are somewhat healthy, well, maybe even people that aren't in a healthy relationship that fight, there's still a connection,
Yeah.
a somewhat of a connection,
Sure.
like Glenn said, engaging. But if
Yeah.
someone's just not engaging at all, yeah, that's just
But there's a
devoid.
there's a big difference with fighting with someone in the sense that you're doing the vitriolic put down, or someone you're fighting with someone just out of a place of truth. There's a huge difference in the way it's approached.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Right.
oh yeah, it's just not a single scenario where one shoe fits all. I think it's very circumstantial.
Right. I would
Thanks.
agree. That's great. Well, this is going well in my opinion so far. So BB Truth says that's like our household, bunch of loud Puerto Ricans. LOL. My mother needs constant validation. And then Janet says one that doesn't validate near me is a narc, and the other one is sanguine. She is so focused on the fun and positive that tends to ignore any concerns or warnings. Yeah, that's very helpful. I want to look at that really quickly before we move forward. I know a lot of people like that, Janet. And in fact, there's a person that's been part of my life in a long time. I don't think she listens, but I'll call her Betty. Just Betty is a sanguine personality, and frankly, I love her. She's a really great person, and she's fun. She's the life of the party. She makes road trips. We back when my mom was doing Monavie, which is it was a juice business. Um, Asahi, I'm probably saying it wrong, but Asahi berry, very healthy antioxidants and stuff, and they charge like I don't know, it's like $125 a bottle for the stuff. It's ridiculous, but she was trying to do it to have another form of income and to be self-sufficient, stuff like that. But anyway, Betty was in the business over my mother, and she had also been over her in Amway as well. So we've known her for a long time, and she has gotten up on stage and talked to people and just really vivacious personality. And like I said, not saying anything negative about her, but she is not a person that I would go to talk about emotional things. She's not. I went to her one time to talk about business and things like that. And on road trips, she, in those situations, we would have 2 or 3 hours, usually going somewhere where we were going to a meeting together. And so we were talking about all kinds of stuff. That was a little bit different, but because of that, she's just so focused on fun. Like you said, she's focused on fun and everybody being in a positive mood. Now, part of that is because of the business attitude of, no negative thinking, stinking thinking and stuff. You always have to be positive. You're having to self-motivate in order to do the multi-level marketing business and stuff. So it's almost cult-like in my opinion in some ways, but just tying that in, Janet, to what you were saying, I can understand how someone that is a sanguine, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that feeling that they're ignoring they're ignoring you because of their focus on other things rather than actually listening to you. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then Jay Lynn says, she keeps losing her internet. She put it on the TV so she can hear. She wrote a bunch of stuff, but it got posted. Yeah, I'm sorry about that because we love your comments, Jalen. But she did get one comment and it says, what about going back and forth conversations, the kind when you interrupt in a good way interruptions, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
What about it? I think in a healthy relationship, if you're just interjecting something, you can learn how to do that, I believe, with someone in a healthy relationship. Um, I don't like that necessarily because I like to listen to someone. Jen will cross her fingers if she has a thought while I'm talking, and I think this is very respectful for her to cross her fingers. Now, for me, when I see her fingers crossed, I'm trying to get out what I'm saying because I want to hear her thought, which is because I care about what she has to say. It's not just about me like vomiting a bunch of words out to her and just saying what I want to say just for me. Uh, I want the conversation to result in coming to a conclusion or whatever. And it's not just during bumps, it's just in conversation. But yeah, when I see her cross her fingers, it's not that I like don't say things. It's just I want to get to the end of I want to make my point quicker so that I can hear what she has to say.
And
So
sometimes I have interrupted you, like right now. I thought you were
not
done.
really,
Sorry, go ahead.
no. I mean, yeah, you have, but you've really been working on it. And so the crossing your fingers thing. And I know why you do that though, because in my opinion, you were talking to someone, a toxic person that was just yelling at you and saying horrible things, and you tried all different ways to deal with that. I understand why you would interrupt. I mean, if you didn't interrupt a person like that, you wouldn't ever get anything said. I don't think.
No, it didn't matter
So
if I did say anything.
that's true. That's true.
Oh,
So Jay Lynn, I think that if you're in a relationship with someone healthy, I think you can learn how to do that, interject things, kind of like a back and forth, give and take sort of thing. I think that's good. So before we get to the questions, I want to talk a little bit about Glenn's definition. We were talking before the broadcast, and I know he in the part of the write-up where he gave his definition, it sounds quite a bit different. And I understand that there's a difference in culture. Like Australia is not the same as the USA. I mean, that's clear. He's using the word. He says, if you said affirmation, I would see that as a more relevant word, and that's fine. To me, affirmation can be swapped with the word validation. It means almost the same thing to me in looking at it from his perspective. It's affirming the person's feelings. Um, we use the word validate. He uses the word affirmation. I don't think we're on opposite ends of that. So in Australia, they don't do that as much, and he seems to think that it's a big thing here. It may be a bigger thing here because of YouTube and because the bevy of um, coaches and wannabe psychologists. Some of them don't have a degree, but they have a YouTube channel. Some of them are counselors, and they do one-on-one counseling online and things like that. There's a lot of good ones out there, but there's plenty of videos on all these different kinds of subjects and validation. If you do a search for validation, there's certainly plenty to look at out there. But this is something that I don't feel is common anywhere. I think that, like I said in my part of the write-up, I don't see this happening in relationships I certainly didn't grow up with it. I was not trained to do this. Now, my mom, because of her being a counselor and our conversations, she and I would talk about it, and I learned how to start doing that by talking to her. And she didn't always do it. uh, Sometimes she would in the past. Now, as I've said, in the last 8 years before she died, our relationship was a lot better because I think that she had been going to Al-Anon for quite some time, and she learned quite a bit from that, and so that helped her to be able to have better conversations, and it was more a give and take rather than her just telling me how she feels, and that's all there was. And I understand why she did that, as I mentioned earlier, because of the way that she grew up. But I didn't get validated or affirmed growing up. That's not something I learned in my family of origin. Um,
Same here.
so, right, right. So when you become an adult, either you learn to validate yourself, uh, or you get in a relationship with someone that's healthy, and you learn to validate or affirm each other. And
Or
yeah,
or sometimes you can get stuck in a one track where you don't know how to validate yourself. You didn't don't even might not even know that's a thing, and you're looking for it externally all the time.
right.
Yeah.
Well, sure. So you're saying like look at it on look for validation on the outside, from relationships maybe, or
Yeah. From other people.
from work. One of the things that Glenn was saying is, are there different kinds of validation? And I was making the point that there's validations of all kinds. We're focusing on mainly validation in relationships, but you can get validation at work. Like someone, a boss telling you you're doing a great job, and keep up the good work and things like that. Get validation if you're going to college or school, and a professor or instructor telling you that you're doing a great job, things like that. That, but I think the parental validation or affirmation is one of the most important things. And if we don't have that, I think that's a huge wound a lot of times.
Yeah.
We just don't have the tools growing up. So when we're in relationships with other people, we're looking, as Jen was saying, we're looking for that validation from the outside. We're not able to do it for ourselves. But in a healthy relationship, now here's where I agree with Glenn. I hope to get to the point where affirmation isn't needed. Like I know how to validate or affirm myself. I'm have enough autonomy where I don't need to look for it externally. I don't need someone else to give it to me.
Yeah.
I'm able to do that for myself. I agree with that. However, I think that affirmation, I'll use Glenn's word for this portion, affirmation in a relationship is essential. Um, we were talking before the broadcast, and, I think that like if Jen is sharing her feelings with me, or she does something that I think is great, and I just simply say, I'm really proud of you. That's both, to me, that's both validation and affirming. It's saying, I see you. I see what you're doing. I see your efforts, and I'm proud of you. I think that is a wonderful thing to hear. When I hear it from her, I feel good. And I think that when we have that lack of validation when we're growing up, and we have that wound, I think that goes a long way of helping us to learn not to need it from the outside. But in a healthy relationship, I just think it's essential. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I do. I like what you said. It's when you get to a point where you don't need it, but it's a way to feel connected. It's a
Hmm.
way to know that you're appreciated and that you're seen.
Hmm.
I think that's a you don't want that to be hinged on somebody else's perspective. Well, I'm not worth anything unless somebody notices me, or
Right,
I'm not seen unless somebody shows that they see me. I
right.
think I know I was there for a long time, but it is, I think, essential, to a degree, to be seen, to be heard, to be known,
Mhm.
and understood. Feel like you're understood.
Yeah.
Definitely.
How do you feel about the word affirmation as opposed to validation? How does that feel to you? Is
It
that
feels it feels good. I don't To me it doesn't feel as all encompassing as validation feels to me.
okay? Yeah.
Doesn't feel 100% validating. But I really do like the word affirmation. I think it's a really good word. And it's a word that I'm learning a lot about right now because on my own journey with breaking out of the mold of needing other people to see me and define me, see my worth. love me, that kind of stuff from
Uh,
childhood. Um, Being able to affirm myself and allow God to affirm me is huge. And it's different. It's very different because I just didn't grow up learning that. I wasn't taught it.
right.
I wasn't shown it. So it does feel very foreign. That old path, like I was telling Glenn before the show, is just the wheels run down that path. It's like a loop and it's a cycle, and the treads, get really worn down in that particular path. So when you're
Right.
trudging a new one and you're learning how to affirm yourself and have self-worth and self-love, and believe the things that God says about you in his word, and believe who he says you are, um, it's a little bit difficult to switch from the one track to the other. The wheels want to keep jerking to the old ways.
Oh, sure, sure.
But it's doable. It's definitely doable.
Yeah, you used a good analogy about when they use horse and buggy and stuff, and when before they had the highways and paved roads and stuff, they usually went down a dirt road, or there's still some areas where they still have dirt roads, and I've been there, and when it was in Gladwin, they have a lot of paved road, but some of the back roads and out in the country are still dirt roads, and they would have ruts. The rain comes in and they make these ruts in the road. We also have an Amish community that lives in that area. So, we still have horse and buggy still out there. But you were saying, just like as you mentioned, that it's as if you're driving down the road and there's a groove or a rut that's made in the soft dirt. And if you're driving in that, then sometimes that's beneficial. But if you're wanting to change directions or go a different route, the cart wants to go back into the rut, and that's synonymous to in the way we live, and keep getting in those old patterns and getting in the same rut, the same tracks when you want to be
Yeah.
doing something else. I thought
Yeah.
that was insightful, babe.
Another word picture too that I used today with Glenn as we were chatting about this, because it makes me think about a scripture in the Bible that talks about the old man. And I know the Bible is referring to something different in a sense, but when you have patterns from childhood all the way up to adulthood, um, it is like a tug of war, changing how you see yourself,
Hmm.
um, and changing how you get, or the kinds of validation you need, or getting healthy validation, getting validation from God and from yourself, and not solely leaning on external from other people, or like you
Right.
had said earlier, your work. It is a tug of war. It's difficult because
Yeah.
again, you're so used to the old ways.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just was
Yeah.
gonna add that word picture.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Jaylen says in the chat, if I don't think I am valuable, can someone else get me to that truly? I'm just perusing the conversation, and I love that you guys talk in the chat with each other and stuff, and Glenn's in there too, so that's great. I just saw that, and I think that's a great question. If I don't think I'm valuable, can someone else get me to that truly? I would say the answer is no to that. I don't think someone else can make you feel valuable. I think you have to do that for yourself. Now, as a believer, that's something that if anyone struggled with that, I would tell them to pray about it and ask Him to do that for you and with you. And I believe the Holy Spirit works with us on that to show us that we are valuable.
Yeah.
But as we've talked about before, when we talk about self-esteem, I think it's something that's lacking in many people. They don't feel valuable. And I think it's because a lot of times we're not getting what we need. As we talked about dependence, we're not getting what we need as children. Our needs and wants are being neglected, and the person we're born to be is covered up. And then when we go out into the world, if we don't have the tools that we need, if we don't, if our self-esteem is not bolstered, the world just eats you alive with all its expectations and bullying and all the stuff.
Lies.
Yeah, oh yeah, the
Because
lies.
I do think the world, I mean, I think many would agree, the world pushes external validation.
Oh, sure. Oh,
Like,
think about sports. The idea that sports, yeah, you play hurt. If you're a
Yeah.
football player, you play hurt, you do what you need to do for the team to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like football and I enjoy sports still. Not as much as I used to, but I still enjoy that. But it's someone ignoring their own feelings in their body. Your body's telling you you've got a sprained ankle. You should, sit on the sidelines, but it's, let's tape it up and go back out there.
Yeah.
Why are they doing that? They're doing that for some sort of validation, either from the coach or the fans or the rest of the team. So it's silly. You're ignoring
Yeah.
your own desire, your own what your body's telling you in order to get some validation, and why to get some kind of trophy at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Some that ends up collecting dust in your trophy cabinet or on a shelf somewhere. Yeah, I agree with you. It's pushed. It's definitely pushed. Or scholastic and academic improvement. Getting good grades. That's really pushed. They say that you can't make it in life if you don't do well in school, and a lot of people have proved that not true.
Or what about the thing you and I have talked about a lot about you are what you do. And when you're in a crowd of people that you don't know, what is the first thing that people ask you?
Yeah.
What do you do?
What's your job? Yeah. Yeah.
We've talked about how much better. What did we come up with? We were like, I wish people would ask you, like, what do you love to do, or what do you care
Yeah.
about, or just something other than that, because it just pushes that you are what you do. Now, there's some truth to that, but it's not the way it's pushed in the world is like your job, your career. Um, Maybe we should just answer differently.
Yeah. Yeah. There was I can't remember his name, but he wrote Butterfly Effect. I think that you actually have that book. We've read it.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
Andy Andrews, or something like that. But
Andrew
anyway,
Anderson or something like that.
he is also a public speaker. He'll go places and talk. And he was saying that when he goes out to dinner or lunch or whatever, he always asks the waitress or the waiter, he says, "What is your dream for your life?" I think it's a great question rather than asking, "What do you do?" I mean, obviously, if you're in a restaurant, you wouldn't ask them what they do if they're your server.
Yeah.
But it's what you're saying, Jen, that shouldn't define a person, what they do. To say to someone, "I'm a waiter," does that define you? Does that say everything about who you are? I don't think so.
Yeah. And maybe it's asked because it is the narrative of the world, the majority narrative, that people do believe that they are what they do. So therefore the question, comes about. That's why people ask it, because that's kind of the going thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Glenn if you're I don't know if you were done sharing
Yeah,
your
I'm done.
feelings.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
He had said affirmation to me is more about respect and truth, and I just wanted him to see if he'd expound on that, what he means by that.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay.
Glenzo.
I have to declare that I was very affirmed as a child, so therefore the background of it. So maybe
Cool.
that's why I'm not having the difficulty that I can see and hear as much anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say my son's doing his exams, has done his exams, and he says, I said, how'd you go on your exams, John? He said, I got a 5 for this and a 6 for that. How I approach that? What's the respect and truth here? Do I say, oh, geez, I'm a bit disappointed in that. You should have got a 7. Do I say that?
Yeah.
No. That's the first thing you'd say, right? So,
Right.
but you can still, but I can still tell the truth and say, hey, John, oh, geez, I'm really pleased I'm really pleased you got through. And what's next on the agenda or something like that. It's
Yeah.
truthful and respectful and acknowledging of what he's achieved. You can see
Sure.
that
Yeah.
you walk away with a totally different attitude. You say, oh,
Yeah.
easy.
Acknowledging. That's
Yeah,
a good
it's
word.
no big deal. Well, there's another scenario I thought of. This is let's just use and another word I would think gets embodied or mixed up with validation, and that's consideration. Let's just look at this one. Okay, I know my sons both they like celebrating birthdays. I'm not into it,
Right.
but But on their birthday, I will ring them and say, "Oh, have a happy birthday." So I don't see that there's anything to do with validation. That's just consideration because I know that
Hmm.
someone else would enjoy a call and being wished a happy birthday. So
Sure.
it
So
doesn't
you
take
do understand.
it
Good.
doesn't take, but that's the thing, Jen. That's not validation. That's just being considerate and
Okay.
acknowledging that people have different views than I do. And
Well, I
that
think the word in a sense means it's more similar than you realize that maybe even I realized. Because when I was sharing with you about my family and our wedding and the
Oh yeah.
lack I was saying the lack of validation from my family. Yeah, what you just explained hits the nail on the head for me. Like the consideration, the acknowledging was lacking. And so I didn't, I guess maybe validation isn't the right word because I didn't feel acknowledged or considered. So
yeah, yeah.
I don't.
So
Oh, go ahead, please.
no, I was just going to say, I can see why you've reacted, but what I couldn't understand is why you said you'd be pissed off or angry, because you can't expect someone to behave like, just because you have an expectation they'll behave like that.
I think when you see
That
it
makes sense.
happening in the family with other siblings and then it's not done for you, it
Yeah.
kind of stands out.
Oh, are you saying that you were set aside as a standout by being treated differently?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that that was the point you were making.
yeah. So that's tough.
Do you want to talk more about that, Jen? Because I think that may be helpful.
There was
Not
some other stuff that I was going to share actually, but not at the moment. I'm just going to
okay.
let it
No
unfold
problem.
naturally.
No problem. Okay, I wanted to bring up something that I saw in chat, and okay, so Jalen says, because when I am out doing my own thing, which I have done too often, I was finding I was looking for others to validate who I was. So self-talk uh, maybe is very important. So that kind of fits into what we're talking about, that outside validation. And again, I think that's what we do when we don't have the proper tools, when the parenting doesn't set us up to do that for ourselves. Now, I think it's interesting and I think it's wonderful. It sounds like a dream when I hear Glenn talk about having that when he was growing up and the way that he was talking about how he would talk to his son about his grades. I just have all these memories. I didn't do horrible in school, but there was a lot of negative if I didn't get straight A's or if I didn't do as well as they expected me. Not only did I not get validated or affirmed, it was very negative for me, to the point where one year I held on to my report card. I did not want to share it with them. And then, of course, as always happens, they get a call from the school because at least here, when you get a report card, you have to have your parents sign it, and then you have to bring it back to show that they've seen it. So I was able to hide, and I did this a lot with many things. I was able to stretch it out as long as I could. I knew I would have to deal with it eventually, but I would stretch it out as long as I could and try to hide. And then they would get the call. And then, of course, my mother would come and say, "Hey, you got your report card last week." And frankly, I would get in more trouble for the hiding than I would probably for the original grades. But I did that because I did not want to hear the negative stuff. They would say backhanded compliments like, "You're so intelligent, you should be doing better." We expect you to get better grades than this. Come on, think about what you're doing. Um, that's not positive. That doesn't help me have autonomy. It doesn't help me to feel good about what I'm doing. What Glenn was saying is, yeah, he might think, you should have done better, or knowing what he's capable of and looking at the report card, he may think, yeah, you could have done better, but he wouldn't say that. But if he said it, he might say it in a different way where there's some more positive things about it first. I mean, I think it'd be fine to say, "Oh yeah, this is pretty good," but I feel like you can do a little bit better if you apply yourself or something like that. I think there's ways to say how you feel about it without it turning to a negative experience. It's just my opinion.
Agree. completely agree.
Thank you. Thank you. So we focused on kind of what Glenn's definition of. I like how he says, "Do I say to Sandra, I love you?" Of course, he says it often. You need to reinforce something that already exists. Do I acknowledge my kids and others in a positive way? Of course, very often. As said on show last week, it narrows the parent-child divide. Yeah, and that's a beautiful dream to me. When I think about that, I would have loved to have had that, but I didn't. So it's up to me to do that for myself and as a believer. And we'll get to this more. Um, it's it's about my relationship with God and being validated by Him and feeling valuable because I know He sees me as being valuable, and that's an important thing. Okay, so anyone want to say anything else about that before we move on to the questions?
Did you want to ask the one at the end of his
Sure.
the paragraph that you shared?
I think you should be asking the question, is the way you validate different or the same?
The love languages, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And
Okay, it should be coming through to you now.
yep, there it is. There it is. Okay, I think we're back, guys. Sorry about that. We had a little software issue. So we're going to go back to what Jenn was saying. She said some really great stuff, and she may not be able to say it exactly the same way, but go ahead.
Are we sure they can hear us?
Well, yeah, let's make sure they can hear us first. Are we back? Annette and Jaylin and
yes. Okay.
Yep.
okay, great. Thank you guys. Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
guys.
Sorry about
Thanks,
the
Annette.
problem.
So the question that Glenn had is the way you validate different or the same as the way you express love. So the thing I was mentioning was it made me think of the love languages. And if you have one person that shows love through acts of service, like say it's a married couple, and then the other spouse feels loved the most through words of affirmation,
Mhm.
that can kind of cause a hiccup. But the other thing I mentioned was I think one of the reasons that words of affirmation is so important to me is because of the lack of it that I had in childhood.
Right.
And I'm so bummed I can't say the things like I said it before, but it's just so important. I think it's not so much to get affirmation back. You know how some people will flatter or say nice things to get something back. It's more giving to people the thing that was so lacking in me, and I'm just passionate about making sure people know that they're seen,
Yeah.
and that they're loved and that they're worthy and delighted in. And again, not to make their head big, but just to communicate that they're seen. It's very
Yeah.
important. So I'm passionate about that, and that's just what Glenn's question made me think about. So I think that the way that we express love can be very connected with the way that we validate others and maybe what we're expecting in return. You know what I mean?
I do. See, that was just as good as what you said. It was just
Sweet.
expressed a little bit differently. That's no problem at all. Yeah. So as far as this part, the way you validate different or the same as the way you express love, I would say they should be one and the same. I think validating someone is showing that you love. The way you express love wraps up that idea of validation or affirmation within it. I was looking at songs for the broadcast, and actually, it's very difficult to find a song that's particularly about validation. There were a few, but I didn't like them. There was even a song that was named Validation, but
I might have heard it. I don't think it was very good.
yeah, well, it wasn't very good. It wasn't very good. So we picked the "Stand By Me" song because that's to me what it's like. It's like being with someone and standing by them no matter what comes. And the lyrics.
Support.
Yeah, support. The lyrics of the song, it says, if the sky should crumble and fall and mountains tumble into the sea, I won't cry, I won't be afraid, just as long as you stand by me. So it's saying to the other person, no matter what happens, if you're standing by me, then everything will be okay. So in the way we express love, validation can be extremely important and make the other person feel loved, not just feel heard and not just feel affirmed, but that the person takes the time to really listen to you and use those words, use their words wisely, and share with you, yes, I hear you, I see you, as Jen was saying, um, I'm with you, I'm standing with you, I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that is expressing love. So I think they're the same. To me, they're the same. Uh,
And when
and
you're in an argument with someone and people are reacting in defensiveness, I think it is very connected to someone not feeling heard or not feeling seen.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that's hurtful, and it kicks up, getting defensive. So that's why validating somebody's feelings is so um, important and priceless, because we've talked about this a lot about how when you have high emotions and there's anger or hurt,
hmm,
there's things that you can do that can throw petrol on the fire and make it bigger.
yeah,
It starts melting faces.
yeah,
But validation seems to be very key in diffusing the situation.
yeah.
Now, I'm sure there are people out there that would be inauthentic in their validation to try to manipulate,
Sure.
um, but it can be genuine, and it doesn't have to. You don't have to agree with the person in order for it to be genuine. You just have to have empathy, and be able to put yourself in that person's shoes and imagine um, how they're feeling in that moment of
Yeah.
being upset. And you know what? That makes me think about that story when I think you were a waiter and you had a customer that was really mad. Do you remember that story?
Not particularly, but I've had a lot of those. So
Yeah, where someone's freaking out, a customer is just getting really upset, and you actually said to them, hey, I can I think their steak was taken too long or something, and they're
yes,
just really
yeah,
hungry, and and you just assured them, and showed empathy and said, hey, I can completely understand why you're pissed off. And no, it wasn't that one. It was the movie one. Tell the movie theater story. Weren't you sitting in some guy's seat and he like flipped out on you?
yes,
That's
yeah,
what it was.
yeah. So this is long before COVID. But theaters started having you in assigned seats. You'd buy your ticket, and then you had to sit in a particular seat. And I hate that because I just like first come first serve. But anyway, they started doing that. So when they first started doing it, and I usually am there early because I genuinely like the previews to see other movies that I might want to see and things like that. Of course, now they have advertisements and they go way longer than they need to go, which is ridiculous. But um, I wanted to see the preview. So anyway, this time I was late, and I had a ticket for an assigned seat, but it was dark and I couldn't see it. Now, what I should have done in retrospect was get my phone out and turn the light on and then make sure that I was in the proper seat. But there wasn't very many people in there at all, and I sat down in a seat. And this other guy comes in, and he was later than I was, and he's looking around, and he comes up and he tells me, "Hey, I think you're in my seat." And I said, "No, I don't think I am." And besides that, now this is wrong of me to say it like this, but I said, besides that, I mean, there's seats everywhere, dude. Come on. Um, so he walked off, and I sit there and watch the whole movie. Movie gets over, and the guy comes up to me and he says, he holds this ticket out to me, says, "Here, since you sat in my seat, I thought you should have this." And I said, "Listen, I went, which is true. I went looking for him after the fact because I realized that I was sitting in the wrong seat, and I didn't get a good look at him. And by that time there were more people there, and I couldn't find him, so I just stayed where I was." And I said, "Why you got to be an asshole?" I apologize, and I explained to him what I just said to you. Is that I looked for you and I couldn't find you, and it's totally my mistake. And I understand, something to the effect, I didn't say it exactly like I would now, but I said, "I understand why you're upset, but my bad." And he actually said, "Listen, I'm sorry. I overreacted." And he explained to me that he was a soldier and he was in conflict and stuff like that, and he didn't react well to the situation. So it ended up um, being a lesson for me, both in how to handle situations where certainly I was in the wrong. It was his seat, but coming back to someone and them being upset, and rather than just getting upset back or starting a fight, but to do the validation and let them know, look, I'm wrong. You're right, but also saying, you didn't have to deal with the way you're dealing with it right now. And he seemed to respond to that. So in many ways, that was a learning experience for me, and maybe it was for him as well. Maybe he walked away from that, and maybe he would react differently the next time. That would be my hope.
Wouldn't it be great if any altercation, both people walk away from it having learned something?
Yeah.
And having grown, learned something about themselves and other people. I think that should always be the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to say hello to Renee really quick. Renee popped in. Hello. Happy New Year to you as well, Renee. Hope everything's going well with you. We're really glad you're here. Thank you for coming in. And also, Chow Young Cat is in here, and he made a comment. And I think this is the first time he's come since we started up again. So we're glad you're here, and hope you are enjoying the broadcast too. And feel free to get involved in the chat. So also my friend John Don's returned this weekend. Good to see you, buddy.
I'd love for you to answer his question.
Right, I'm going to. Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. He asked a question. He says, "Do you think your grandfather failed to validate your dad?" That is a great question. I would say absolutely he failed to validate my dad. Absolutely. My grandfather was good in many areas. Spiritually, he was a leader. He was a deacon in the church, and he taught Sunday school and things like that. And he was very good at teaching you how to fish and teaching you how to work on an engine or change a tire or put things in your trunk for dealing with if you get stuck in snow on the side of the road and things like that. But he was not good at validation. In fact, I'll tell a quick story. One time I was helping him tear down like a shanty shed that my Uncle Denny used to live in. It was kind of like a tree house, really. When he was a teenager, he didn't want to live in the house. He was kind of an outdoor person and stuff. So he built a little outdoor tree house for himself, and he lived in it. And that was there for many, many years. And my grandma, she got to the point where she was just tired of looking at it. So she had Grandpa go out there and tear it down. And I was probably 17 or 18. And it was when I lived with them to repeat my senior year after going to Heritage and all the stuff with Jim Baker and all that. So anyway, I was helping him do it. And we got a lot of it tore down, but Denny had used like a telephone pole, an old telephone pole, as one of the foundation things to hold the two on the other side of the tree. So it was stuck in there and all that. So my grandfather chained to it, and I was like holding it to make sure that it didn't go the wrong way. And when he pulled it, it came loose really quick, and it hit me in the head. And it knocked me to the ground. And my grandfather, he was on the tractor, and he stopped, and he didn't even get off the tractor. He just stopped, and he was looking. And I started crying. And I look at this incident many, many times, and it wasn't just the pain of it. I was crying because my grandfather didn't, come to see if I was all right. He didn't say, "Hey, are you okay?" He just sat on the tractor just looking at me. In fact, he said, you're 18 years old. You shouldn't be crying about this.
Ouch.
So I was not validated by him. So it stands to reason that if he was doing that to his grandson, I didn't have a whole lot of negative experiences like that with my grandfather, but he certainly wasn't someone that knew how to do that. As he got older, he got way better at talking about emotions and things like that. But at that time, that was one of the most negative experiences I had with him. And I remember how it felt to this day. So, John, that's a very, very great question. And to put it in perspective of what my dad went through, my grandfather was a hard worker, and living in rural Michigan, jobs in the little town they lived in were not plentiful. You have a lot of people competing for the few jobs that were available. So he had to drive like an hour and a half every day. He worked at Dow Chemical. So he would leave early in the morning and he would come back, later in the evening. And sometimes he had to work third shift and he had swing shifts and things like that. So this is not an excuse, but he was gone a lot, honestly. Um, so I don't think that he validated my dad at all. And that could be the reason why my dad didn't learn how to do that. But here's the thing. I don't think that's an excuse. Whatever way we grew up, whatever our training is,
Yeah. The
as an
programming.
yeah, the programming, that's not an excuse as an adult to learn how to do better with our kids than our parents did with us.
Yeah.
I may be wrong about that, but that's my opinion. I think it's important to, to learn how to do the things that for our kids, it's important to learn how to do the things that we didn't have
Yeah.
to do better than our parents did.
People are talking in the chat, and Glenn asked a really good question about how you break the cycle. I know for me, it's being broken by self-affirmation, self-validation.
Mhm.
Because unfortunately, some of the messages I'm still getting from my parents and my family are negative, and
Yeah,
they do not see me clearly. And if I was still in the place I was a few years ago, it would be devastating,
right.
and very crippling. It's very, very crippling. So going on a journey with God and with myself, and even Cripps has been along for the ride, and he's just so
Mhm.
patient, loving, and supportive.
Oh,
Um, just it's like finding out who you are and also affirming that what you're
yeah,
finding. I've been through a lot in my life, and the abusive marriage that I was in, it was really, really difficult. But being able to look back and say, okay, God got me through it. I became stronger going through all that stuff. I survived it, which Jason and I have had a lot of conversations. He did a lot of group therapy that had a lot of women in it that were abused, whether it was
yeah,
domestic violence or emotional abuse,
all
psychological
kinds.
abuse,
Mhm.
sexual abuse. There's and he's so wonderful to share this with me, and it does help me seeing myself more clearly. But he says there's people that have been through less than what you've been through that just
Mhm.
completely crack.
Yep.
They just lose it and they can't recover and recoup, and they're just a mess.
Hmm.
So just being able to see the strength in myself, how I got through that, and how God got me through is huge.
Yeah.
And there's things that I've learned, and there's ways that I've grown that my family just does not see. And there's an old part of me that wants to shake them and get them to see it, because there's an old wounded part of me
Yeah.
that feels like it's not real unless they see it. It's just
Wow.
not real.
Wow.
And that's the thing that I'm breaking away from, because I have to realize that what I see in myself is my reality,
Yeah.
to an extent, because I know we can, the heart can be deceitful and all that stuff.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but just using my logic, I've been getting to know myself more and more over the years as I've been digging into my own stuff and childhood and why I
Mhm.
chose that person to begin with, and so on and so
Mhm.
forth.
Sure.
So I've been getting to know myself better, and beginning to trust myself more,
Hmm.
because when you're in an abusive situation, you're just really programmed not to trust your gut, the red
Yeah.
flags that you see, like just so many different things.
Right.
So you leave those kinds of situations just feeling decimated when it comes to trust in yourself, especially like when you're realizing, wow, I stayed that long and I chose this person, and then
Hmm.
you're looking at it and you're thinking, how can I trust myself to pick someone, or even pick friends or people around me to hang out with that aren't going to abuse me? You just
Right.
kind of feel like you have a target on your back because of the way you've been programmed, in childhood and stuff.
Absolutely.
So
Wow, babe. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
That was very, very transparent and very helpful. Yeah. So if you didn't get that, again, if you didn't get that in your childhood, you tend to go into relationships and you're expecting that to come from the outside. And if you don't get that from the person that you're with, I mean, where does it come from? I mean, the only place
yeah,
you can get it as a believer, you get it from God and you get it from yourself. Um, but again, that's where I think in a healthy relationship, if you're able to get it from the person that you're in relationship with, it just is so helpful. It just, to me, it just makes the relationship even better, and it is a better way to be able to express the love that you have for someone else.
Yeah.
You mentioned the love languages earlier. I love the idea of love languages, and that's the thing. If you're at least willing to go that far, in expressing love languages, and you were mentioning, maybe one has words of affirmation, the other acts of service, things like that. We've discussed this before, but it's the idea of learning how not just to experience love from your partner in the way that you express it, but learning how to express love towards them in the way that they feel it. And to me, that's where the validation really comes in and is important. You're learning not only their love language and things like that, but you're learning to express things to them the way that they hear it best, the way that they're best affirmed. Their
Yeah.
best self.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think our natural inclination is to love people the way we love to be loved.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes the wires get crossed. But if you learn a person and you listen and you see them, you start to learn, the ways that they like their expectations when it comes to how they like to be loved.
Absolutely.
And it's very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's helpful and super important. And to me, yeah, I agree that affirmation it doesn't seem as all inclusive as validation, but I definitely see that as important for relationships too. They can be related, but to me, they're a little bit different. But that's
Yeah,
okay.
just a smidge.
Just a smidge different.
But support and consideration, I think those are two really good words that Glenn had mentioned. There was one more, acknowledging.
Acknowledging.
That's a really, really good word too.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to look at the chat really quick, make sure I didn't forget anything. Oh, one of the things I mentioned this, but I didn't see it in the chat until just now. But Jalen says, for me, I made a decision not to do the same things that my parents did when I raised my daughter.
Yes.
I also said I'm sorry as many times as necessary. Jalen, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. That's important. It ties into kind of what I was saying. So I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, however we were raised, it's up to us as parents to, and I'm not a parent, but I have three nieces and a nephew, and I have two godchildren, and I've been around infants and things and children, and um, it's especially with my nephew because he's a boy, and I can relate to him a little bit differently, just both of us being male. I did the best I could with the female, the nieces, and they know that I love them. But I tried with them to treat it as this needs to be different than the way I was raised, in the
Yeah.
way that I talk to them, in the way that I deal with them, and I did the best I could. I did a pretty good job. I remember with Charlie, and this is so stupid, but I've got to tell this story really quick. I had this slinky, and I forget where I got it from, but I didn't play with it. I just set it on my desk. I think I got it from someone at Winthrop, and it was just a gag gift or whatever. But it was a colored slinky, and Charlie was I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, and she said, Uncle Jason, can I play with that? I said, yeah, but just be very careful with it. I mean, for some reason, it was important to me, and I can't even explain why it was important, but it was. And she took it and she was playing with it and everything seemed fine. Well, what she did was she hooked the end of it on the doorknob and let it go, and it bent the top spring and ruined it. I mean, I tried to get it back in place, but it was the only shaming thing I ever said. Is, what are you doing? I told you to be careful with it. And the minute it came out of my mouth, I heard the way I was talked to. I mean, it was just like that. I felt the words that I was saying in me, and she seemed to handle it okay. But right as soon as I said it, I put my hand on her shoulder. I said, "I'm sorry. There was no reason for me to say that like I did. This is just a toy. It is not as important to me as you are to me. I know you
Aw.
didn't do it intentionally, so please forgive me for my reaction." but I had hoped that I would never use shame and guilt toward my nieces. I know I'm human. I know we make mistakes and all that. I have to I have to be very careful of the way that I talk to people to make sure that I don't say things to others in the way that I was spoken to.
Isn't that funny how that can come up?
Mhm.
Just come out, but you're like, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah,
Oh
where
my
did that come from?
goodness.
Now, in the Christian world, we would say that I was acting in the flesh rather than the spirit, and I would agree with that. But still, whether that's a factor or not, it's still learning how to just treat people better. Just to handle situations in a different way than what you experienced. So that's important.
Good stuff.
Jalen says, I wonder what it would be like if we were all in the same room.
And hear what Glenn said. He said, I've been in the same room as Jen and Crips. They are scary.
Annette says, my dad wasn't around as much because he was working a lot. He's a very nice guy, maybe a little too laid back. Yeah, I hear that. A lot of us have parents that worked a lot. My dad is a workaholic. He definitely worked. Work was the most important thing to him. I mean, that's where he gets his identity from. Uh, Again, perfect example. He gets his identity from externally, from what people say about him, the way people look at him, and as much as I've tried not to need that, I mean, that's the way I was trained. So I have to fight against that as well, to not need that outward validation to try to validate myself. It's harder than it seems, in my opinion.
To self-validate.
Right, right. I do feel like I've learned to do that, but I haven't arrived. I haven't arrived there. It's still difficult. Say hello to Nick really quickly. Hello, Nick. Glad that you're here. Thanks for stopping by, and we're glad that you're here. All right, so we're getting close to the bottom of the hour. So we've gone through this whole thing, and we haven't really gotten to the questions, but all the questions are here at the end. So we'll dive into those right quick. First question. What does validation look like when we were young? I think we touched on this a little bit, but we'll get into more detail about that. And I'll go first on this one. It looks like nothing I experienced. I probably did get some validation, but as Glenn's definition, Glenn's saying it, you do it for the other person. It comes across as not being real, or not. I'm paraphrasing what he said, not being real or being fake. And I think it doesn't always have to be like that. It depends on what your reasons are for using it. But my parents, I think, were occasionally saying nice things about me or validating me, but it was always tied into negative things. Like the example of my report card where they were saying, "Oh, you should have done better, as smart as you are." That's the kind of validation I got. So it was a backhanded validation. Same thing with compliments. If there was a compliment, it was a backhanded compliment. Not just very rarely, not just saying, "Hey, you know what? You did a good job with this," or "You did a good job with that." Coincidentally, I ended up working for my dad a lot. It was very difficult because, obviously, what I realized later is I was working with his mistress. His mistress is his work. That's the most important thing to him over everything else.
Yeah.
Talking to Jen about that today, and the way that he got validation from people that he worked for, contractors and things like that, to the point where if a contractor came by the job and says, "Hey, we want to try to get this done quickly as possible," and he would change everything that we were doing, pull us off jobs that we were already working on, and then put us on this other job and also to say, well, we need to work this weekend in order to get this done in time. Not asking us if we could work, just making decisions for us.
Assuming, yeah.
He does that all the time. But I was going to say that I always wanted validation from him in work. and I would crave it. I would go think that I did a good job on something and go to him and come and look at it. But the problem was that he would always find something wrong, no matter how good I did or how good I felt I did. He he was always looking for something, and he would find it. Even if there wasn't anything to find in my mind, he would find something that I didn't do right.
Yikes.
I would nail a piece of base to the wall, for instance, I would do baseboard and say, well, why'd you use so many nails? Like there are too many nail holes. Now I get that because I've done some painting, not a whole lot, but on a few occasions I've had to do painting. And when you're a painter, you have to fill every nail hole with putty.
Putty or caulk.
Caulk, yeah. So the less holes that we use as trim carpenters, the better it is for the painters. But I don't think my dad really cared about the painters. I think that he was just, I don't think that it even crossed his mind, hey, we need to put less holes in there so the painters don't have to fill them. I think he was just,
See, that would have been lovely to say it that way. Way
yeah.
better.
Yeah, funny, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been different if he'd said it like that rather than just being accusatory of why'd you use so many, nails. That would have been better if it was presented in the idea of, hey, we need to be considerate of other people. That would have come across a lot better. So for me, the answer to the first one, I didn't get what I would consider proper validation or affirmation, and that's one of the reasons why I struggle to need that so much, and why I respond so well to it. When I do get it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's like a balm or a salve, on a wound.
Yeah.
It just is very soothing. What about you, Jen?
Yeah, I don't really remember getting any validation either. I think it was last week I was talking about the whole dishes fiasco. Having to stand there when my dad redid chores that in his mind I did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just the delivery and the whole energy and tone, him being frustrated and angry. Um, and then, of course, it's just amazing what we do as kids, the blanks that we fill in when words aren't said. Like, if you see your dad redoing something you did and he's making you stand there to watch and he's harping on you for doing it wrong and explaining, in a condescending tone why it's wrong. And you just start having this sometimes conscious, sometimes subconscious self-talk like I'm an idiot, I'm stupid, I don't do anything right.
Right.
This was my childhood.
Yeah.
I just felt so defective.
Sure.
And then, as I shared last week, just being afraid to make mistakes. But yeah, the validation just was not good, and it was almost like I was validated, and yeah, like you had said, in negative ways. And when we talk about, like, what was one of the words Glenn used in regards to validation? I write down, hold on. Acknowledging consideration. I just was going to share real quick that I love art. I'm an artist. I like illustrating. I do a lot of things with painting, and I remember coming up to my parents as a young adult, kind of trying to launch off into adulthood and sharing with them my dreams of becoming like an artist. And instead of them encouraging me and validating me in positive ways, I remember them saying, it's really hard to make a living in that line of work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And
Yeah.
so, when you're younger and impressionable, it, it's almost like your belief in yourself is enmeshed with your parents' belief in you. And
Sure.
so what I heard was, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like it could have been worded better,
Yeah.
where they could have still shared that truth, because it is a really difficult
Sure.
line of work to get into. There's so many artists and it's competitive, but they could have said, but you have the talent. If you buckle down and work hard and work on your portfolio, and which
Uh-huh.
we believe you could do,
Yeah.
we believe in you. Go at it.
Go
Run after your
for it.
dreams. So um, that was kind of the theme of my childhood,
Yeah.
making mistakes, being afraid. And even in that one particular memory that seared into my brain, just like being afraid to try things, being afraid to do all kinds of stuff. So
Sure.
yeah, not a lot
Sure.
of validation.
Yeah. Why, if you didn't get, again, if you didn't get that, why would you think that you could try that? And it's something
Yeah, and
that,
if your parents don't believe in you, who the heck will?
yeah,
Oh my gosh. It's
yeah,
so debilitating and injuring. Ugh.
yeah. So they set you up by not giving you the tool, again, the proper tools that you need to make it in the world. And it's such a tragedy because, in my opinion, you are a great artist and you could do something with it if you wanted to. And I just think it's a crying shame that you didn't have that validation that you desperately needed and would have helped you at an early age, knowing that it is hard to make it as an artist. But why would you prevent yourself from at least trying?
Yeah.
Um, and I've told the story before, but it's the same thing with me with acting. I love acting and writing and directing, and I have had some success locally with that, and have really enjoyed doing it. And that's something I did for me. I didn't do it because my parents were supportive, because they weren't. I told the story about the first thing that I tried. I did all the church stuff and the school stuff, and that's one thing. But to actually audition for a play uh, at a kind of prestigious playhouse in the area that we live, and to make it, and their response was, "Well, we didn't think you'd make it." It was pretty much the same thing. It's hard to make it as an actor. Why do parents? I don't understand why parents do that. And they can say all they want. Well, we're afraid for you. We don't want you to set yourself up for failure. Well, that's what you're doing by not.
Yeah, you're already doing that.
You're
Jeez.
setting me up for failure by, before I've even tried to do anything. You're telling me
Exactly.
how hard it is and how difficult it is to make it, and not saying, hey, you got some talent. And I do have some talent. I know that about myself. And I basically know that about myself because I have experienced it. But also, perfect strangers seem to be more validating to me than
Yes.
your own family sometimes. I mean,
What's going on with that?
yeah, people that I've
Oh,
never met, I don't know, come up to me when I was doing plays and say, "Wow, I really liked your role," or "Your script was amazing and you did a great job." Or, if I directed, they say, "Well, you really did a good job with directing," whatever it is. And that feels good. It feels good for someone to come up to you, even a stranger. But there's this cry of the soul to get that from your parents,
yeah.
who know you, who raised you. You know,
Yeah. And if they're your parents and they're the ones that should know you the best, and you even think they're my parents, they know me better than anybody on the earth.
yeah,
Then if they don't believe in me again, it's so defeating and deflating and sheesh.
yeah,
Here I'm at 40 finally, just I've completely thrown away and given up on wanting and needing my parents' approval and support. It's like hanging on to hope, which is what I did in my last marriage too. It can be a very dangerous thing holding on to hope when it
yeah,
comes to people. And it's freeing. It's been freeing for me to let that go and to know that this is their issue. There's something going on with them, and I don't have control over. Because I think I've been trying, and I know you've mentioned this too, Jason, where you're trying to prove because you so desperately want that that approval from your parents and for them
mhm,
to believe in you
yeah,
follows you into adulthood. But if you're not going to get it, it's just like, why am I waiting around? um,
yeah.
I
Why am
need to
I
move
waiting?
on, believe in myself.
Yeah, and this comes from Scripture too. The idea of the blessing. There was actually a book written about this, the blessing, and the idea of how from the Bible we get ideas of the kind of things that uh, are expected in families that we don't get. Um, in Hebrew culture, it was very important uh, uh, before the patriarch died. He would bless his kids, and you may disagree with the way it's set up, but the firstborn got the blessing. And we know that Esau sold his birthright because he was the oldest. There were twins, and he was the one that was born first. and he sold his birthright. He cared so little about it that he sold his birthright for a bowl of stew to Jacob. Um, and God was very angry at him about that because obviously it's important. The blessing is important. And I have had to come to the realization that I'm not ever going to get that from my dad. I'm not ever going to have my dad say, "I'm proud of you. You're a good man. You have learned from your mistakes, and you've." I would even be okay if he said something like, "You've made a lot of mistakes in your life, but you've come back from it, and you're a good person. You're a good man. You're whatever." I don't think parents realize how far comments like that go for a child, even an adult child,
Yeah.
to take the time to say something like that. It is super important. I think it's even important, even if you've learned not to expect that from your parents. If they would ever say something like that, you'd probably blow the top of your head off metaphorically.
Yeah.
You'd be like so shocked that even came out of their mouth because it's something that you're not used to.
Yeah.
So anyway, what
Oh,
about
yeah.
you? What about you, Glenn? I know that you had mentioned that you had, kind of a different childhood, and I'm very grateful for that for you. But so, if you did get this or affirmation, then what did that look like when you were young?
Encouragement,
Hmm.
as distinct from what I'm seeing in chat, which is that's just thinking, I'm glad I don't get depressed because what I'm reading is pretty damn depressing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah. So I was encouraged. I mean, it doesn't mean you're the best runner in the athletics, or you're the best footballer, or you're or the biggest brain. It just means encouragement, and as and that the other thing is that my parents spent time with me as a child. They didn't just say, "Here's a television set, sit in front of it like an automaton." No, no, they took time out to spend time with both myself and my brother, and I think
uh-huh,
that's very important. So the interaction, so it's encouragement, interaction, and all of the things like that really now I'm just from what I'm reading, I'm seeing it. Holy crap! This
yeah,
is really stuffing a lot of people right up.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So maybe you see the value of it now, even if you don't necessarily agree with the way the definition reads. Maybe you see that there's
Something
because,
to it.
yeah, because you can see the lack of it. That so many people have experienced the lack of it.
I
Um,
can certainly see why you would place such an emphasis on being validated because you've grown up without it. So I think
yeah,
it assumes I can certainly it assumes a whole in your world and in my world it's a whole different. This is a whole different ballpark. But
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, totally different. So I have to agree with you that I didn't. I have to say that I didn't quite understand the relevance of why you place such a degree of importance, but I can see by the fact that you've been very deficient in and getting any of this from your parents, or very little anyway.
right,
What would mean so much today as an adult? It makes perfect logical sense, and I'm quite sad that it is like that. I really am, because I can see how it's just affected so many people just in the few people that are in the chat.
right,
Oh, it's really tough. It's emotionally debilitating to read some of this. Yeah,
yeah,
it's very much affecting me, I can tell you.
yeah. I appreciate that. I see that in itself is validating. I'm not saying that as a joke. It really is. I mean, it's I chuckled, but I'm only chuckling because it's ironic. Um, yeah, to see the deficiency and see that so many people have lacked that. I just think it would be so valuable, even as an adult, to even if you didn't get it as a child, to have a parent come back around later and give you that validation. It seems like that would just go a long way to help you heal from that very deficit that you have
Oh, yeah.
to I know you can't go back and change the way you were raised, but that's okay. I mean, you can't go back and change it, but you can have a parent realize that maybe that they didn't do things the way that I think they know. My theory is that a parent knows that they made mistakes, um, but to acknowledge it is a completely different thing. Now, I did get that somewhat from my mother later on in life. She saw me struggling in many ways, and I think that she could identify the difference between the way that she saw me as a child and wrote in her journals about her opinion of me, and how much I struggled as an adult. And I know she saw many things that she did wrong or wish she had done differently. And I know she saw the things that she felt would feel like my dad did that damaged me as well. So I know that was difficult for her, that in between place of not knowing you can't go back and fix it. And I think she did the best she could to discuss that with me and talk about that with me.
Yeah.
So, Cripps, can I just ask you a question? And people in the chat, has anyone actually gone through what I would call, say, the negative experience as a child, but it's improved when they're now adults, or is the die cast as you see it? If you do it through childhood and it's a poor situation, does that just perpetuate itself pretty much automatically into your adult relationship with parents?
That's a good question. So if anyone in the chat wants to answer that from your perspective, what?
I was gonna say I thought mine got better, but parts of it haven't. With my mom, things have gotten a little bit better than the
Yeah.
childhood stuff, but there's still some issues there. Part of me thinks it's a hard cycle to break because it involves 2 different people or 3 different people all deciding to get healthy and break the patterns, and even recognizing all their different the ways they've contributed, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it did, like I've said, it did get a little bit better with my mom, but with my dad, I, you know, I don't hold out hope that it's going to change. I'm sure there's a part of me internally that still holds on to that. Maybe there's a little flicker of hope that it would be different. But as I said, to me, if there was any validation now, if he gave me the blessing or even said, I see that you're a good man and whatever, I think I would cry. I think it would be so meaningful for me to have not had that as a child, but to get that as an adult from my father. I think that would make it would mean a great deal to me. That's all I can say. I don't think that I will get that, but in just thinking about it, there's a part of me that still yearns to have it, even though I know that it's probably very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
No, I have to learn to get that for myself, because it's not something that's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
So Jalen says, I believe it can be better or different. Sometimes getting away is best.
Janet shared that I never saw improvement.
Okay. Yeah. I have seen people in counseling that talk about their kids and talk about the mistakes they've made. I know it can happen and does happen, but it really takes the person looking at themselves, examining who they are and what brings a person to that. I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's different for different people, but how do they ever get to that point where they're able to take that inward look and be honest with themselves? Look, I've made mistakes, and have a desire to change it. I don't know. I don't know what caused that. Jalen says it helps me that I just forgive and make a choice to love and keep trying. I gave up needing validating from my dad. Yeah, I'm in the same place, Jalen. I'm just sharing that in thinking about it, I feel like it would go a long way if I ever did get it. But yet, I think as an adult, you have to come to that conclusion, because otherwise you're doing what Jen says. You're holding on to hope.
And that's
And
very painful.
yeah. Now, biblically speaking, in Romans, it says, hope maketh not ashamed. Don't be ashamed of hope. Hope is an important thing. And it's interesting that my mom made rocks with the different verses that people put on, or saying something nice on the rocks. And my dad used that scripture, don't be ashamed of hope. That was the scripture he chose. So it's interesting that he uses it, but doesn't have any idea what it means as as far as this particular topic is concerned. Hello to Brother Dave. Brother Dave just popped in. He says, I have no clue what I'm doing anymore, and I'm 40, LOL. I just feel like a hamster in a wheel, like many people do. Yeah.
Amen.
I think we all feel like that. How does validation help us grow, Jen? How does validation help us grow?
I feel like it's watering a plant.
Mm,
In validation, the soil gets dried up. And this is just talking, validation for yourself, from God, from
sure.
people that are important in your lives, like your parents.
Mm-hmm.
I think, we all have our down days, and it's nice to get attaboys or attagirls or encouragement, when you're feeling down. Everybody has down days and up days. So I think it's important in life to keep us going and keep us growing and learning.
Yeah.
I think it's very important
Yeah.
for growth.
I agree. I think it would be a balm, on the wound. I know for me with you, when I've validated, that's exactly what it feels like. It feels healing to me. It feels like the wounds that are there, or the deficit, is being filled by your validation of me, or your affirmation of me. Hearing I'm proud of you from you, I just didn't get that. So, because my relationship with you is important, and I believe what you say. So for me, it's not fake. It's not just that you're saying it to appease me or make me feel better. It is meaningful. I know
Yeah.
that you mean it.
Yeah.
And then that's important. It's important that it's not fake. It's important that the intention behind it is genuine and authentic. And for you, from you, for me, it is. And that it is incredibly healing and supportive. And there's really not a whole lot like that. And also, to use Glenn's question about expressing love, to me, it is expressing love when you do that.
Yeah.
It just ties into everything else that you do. You do a lot of things to show love to me, and that's just to me, it's a higher love. It's a way to love someone better, to add that element of validating into it. I think it's just adding to the importance of expressing love towards someone.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I agree.
What about you, Glenn? What do you think about this one?
I think the word for this time is motivation.
Okay.
It helps us grow, because from what I've seen, I think if you are encouraged, it does motivate you to continue doing stuff. And you don't
Yeah.
you look outward rather than look inward.
Right.
It's like a verbal or a affirmation incentive, if you like, to yeah, that's pretty much it. But I did want to, if you don't mind, I want to make a comment on the previous question,
Yeah.
which I didn't get around to, or you forgot me.
Did I
Whatever it
not
is.
ask you? I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, it's all good. It's no drama. But
Okay.
as you know, but I think it's relevant. I said before that Sandra and I would never discuss the word validation, because it's not relevant. But I did ask her the question: what is the one thing that I do that demonstrates love to you?
Oh, good
And
question.
and as you know, she's has a serious disability. And she said the fact that you're prepared to shower me, to help me get dressed, to cook my meal, to do the things for me that most people would never do and stay to do. So that was what he saw as an overriding expression of love. And I
Hmm.
know it's not all this honky dory romance. Sometimes it comes down to a real bottom line, is that it's the hard yards that really are the most loving yards.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, so yeah, just wanted to add that, please. Thanks.
No, that's great. I
Thanks,
appreciate you
Glenn.
sharing that. Yeah. So to me, that goes in the category of following up words with action. To me, validating words are great, but how much better are validating actions? It's backing up
Yes.
the words with
Yep.
actually doing something. To me, you can validate someone all day long with words, but if you're not doing it in action, the words, at least for me, the words fall empty. They seem empty to me. So I think that you showing Sandra in that way, even though it's not necessarily something she needs, but that's the way she expressed it. So that's huge. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. All righty. So moving on to the next one. I think everybody got a chance to answer that one. Why is validation important in relationships, Jen? Why is validation important in relationships?
I think we have mentioned a lot on this particular
Yeah.
question.
Okay. We can skip to the next one. Um,
Safety.
okay.
How does it affect safety and growth? Um, yeah, I know for me the lack of acknowledgement and support, consideration, encouragement from my parents, which equals a validation, has not made me feel safe
Right.
with them.
Right.
And I think it has stunted my growth in a lot of ways. You know, gosh, how do you explain that?
Take your time.
I think it kind of catapulted me into a place for a really long time of questioning myself.
Hmm.
And I've mentioned the being afraid to make mistakes, being afraid to try things, being afraid to chase after my dreams. Um, it just, there was growth, like spiritual growth in some areas, but when it came to me growing as a person, it just was stunted in a lot of
Sure.
ways. Because
Sure.
I just didn't believe in myself.
Right.
Um, and it stemmed from that lack of validation in childhood. So that's my
Yeah.
answer.
Okay. I think that's a great answer. Thank you. Um, so how does it affect growth, or how does it wait? How does it affect?
The relationships, safety, and growth.
Yeah, and affect the relationship, safety, and growth. Um, I think you've talked about the growth part, so I would agree that it helps the relationship grow. For me, it does make me feel safe. You mentioned safety. It makes me feel safe that I can fail in front of you, and it doesn't change the way you feel about me. I can make mistakes, and it's okay because you've made it clear how you feel about me and that you're proud of me and things like that. Because I am human, I do make mistakes,
Mhm.
uh, and so having that does make me feel safe. It makes me feel like um, what I do is not as important. I don't think I'm explaining that right. What I do is important, but my performance, it's okay. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not as based on my performance that cares about me at a level that's not just based on what I do.
Yeah. You can just be you.
Yeah.
You're
Thank you.
accepted.
Just be who I am.
Yeah. And I messed up my answer because I was thinking of just personal growth. But the question is, how does it affect the relationships, safety, and growth?
Hmm.
Um, I think I think it can stunt the growth of a relationship, meaning like connection, and safety is definitely connected into that as well. I think in our relationships, we're always wanting to grow together,
Hmm.
and when you think about family or friendships or spouses, you want to be growing together. And I know
Sure.
for me, it has affected me growing closer to my parents, and that's tied into the safety.
Hmm.
I feel under the microscope when I'm around them. and that's not a comfortable feeling.
Sure.
I almost feel like they're waiting for me to screw up so they can point it out.
Yeah.
And who wants to be around that? And
Not
and and
me.
that's not a loving. It's just not a loving atmosphere.
No.
So, and I'll say this. We don't have health insurance right now, and we're working on getting full time jobs and stuff. And I was with a man for 14 years who refused to give us health coverage. Like we had it for a couple years in the midst of 14 years. And my parents, and God bless them, I know that they are concerned, as parents do get, where they're like, I'm sure their mind is reeling about, if something happens and you're not insured, what's going to happen. Um, are you going to be okay, kind of a thing. And so, but right now, and this is just, I'm trying to tie it into the question,
No,
but
you're doing
like
fine.
my whole family seems overly concerned about um, you and I having health insurance and full-time jobs. There seems to be so much focus on these two things to the point where my brothers are bringing it up. And you know, as an example, we showed up for Thanksgiving and we had just gotten married, and my brother shows up and the first thing out of his, no congratulations on your wedding. Where's your husband? How are you guys doing? How are the newlyweds? Nothing. It's, bringing up full-time jobs and health insurance.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
just, that's just an example of feeling under the microscope and feeling judged. It's just, not, not good.
Yeah. And the reason why that's bad is because it would almost be better if, I mean, I still don't like it, but it would almost be better if at first there was something about the wedding, there was some positive spin on it before the analyzing part happened. Like to say,
Yeah.
oh, so how did everything go with your wedding? I'm so glad that you're happy now and all that. And then do you guys have full-time jobs and all that? How's that going? There's a way to ask the questions that you're concerned about,
Yeah. Like
but
segueing into it.
segueing into it. But if it doesn't come with anything else that's positive, what do you think the reaction's going to be?
You end up bristling,
Yeah.
you know, and you feel judged and under the microscope. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As you're saying, so you would tend to be on the defensive rather than uh, trying to see it from their perspective of, yeah, this is coming from a place of genuine concern for me.
yeah. And I do think that there is some genuine concern and love, but it's just the delivery and the focus that's on it. They know that I got out of an abusive situation for a really long time, and I don't know, I guess I would be a little more focused on, hey, you're healthy, you're healing, you found someone that like genuinely loves you and cares about you. Um, you're looking for full time, you're doing all the things that you need to do. Um, there's just no mention of any of that.
Mhm,
So, and then that plays into not feeling seen, you
mhm.
know.
Now, I don't want to take away from the way that you look at it, but see, to me, without there being any positive validations of anything that you've done, I don't I find it harder to believe that there is genuine concern. But that's just my opinion. It would be easier for me to believe it if there was some of the other things, like congratulations on your wedding, if there's any comments. The thing about the wedding is we got more congratulations and comments from people that we've never met in person that come to listen to the shows and chat.
Yeah.
Not this show, but other broadcasts we're on. We've had so many people um, share that with us. And Renee sent us a gift and text message, and that was incredibly moving to me.
Yeah.
That
It's thoughtful.
it's thoughtful. And so to have an expectation that our families uh, would recognize that in some way, a little bit more than someone that doesn't know us as well. That now we've met Renee in person, but I'm just saying in general,
Yeah.
a lot of the and maybe someone listening might say, well, it's easy to just type it in chat. Congratulations, that's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. It is validation that, hey, you're married and congratulations, that's wonderful, we're happy for you. That goes a long way, and I don't think it's outrageous to expect that from your family.
No, I don't either. Feeling invisible is not, just doesn't feel good.
No,
And
it
that's what
doesn't.
it makes me feel like. It makes me feel invisible.
Makes you feel not seen and not heard and not recognized,
Yeah.
which I mean, frankly, to me, is not good for anybody. I don't think anybody likes that.
No.
No. All right. What about you, Glenn? How does it affect safety and growth?
Well, I think if two self-validated people get together, I think that I would hope that there's automatic safety and a platform which is totally open for growth. I just think
Yeah.
it. I think that also. I think being in a position of being like self-validated. I think how I do it is more automatic. And I think when people are in that place, I think they become less aware of thinking, oh, I haven't been validated, and you just get on with it. And maybe that's relevant to some people who aren't self-validated. It becomes of a greater importance, if you like, or a greater relevance. Like when I hear Jen, you were saying before the show, and some stuff you've said, how important you considered it, and I'm sort of shaking my head, thinking, well, why is it that important to you?
Because
Why do you?
it's my family.
Yeah, but I get where you're coming from, but I'm saying, do you think that would change somewhat if you were more self-validated? Would the role of others to fill the validation cup be less the more you got in your own? Is the question.
Yeah, and I'm working on that right now. I think me knowing that my marriage to Jason's a big deal and it's incredibly important and special to me, that means the most, what I think, which is a super change because before what I thought wasn't really part of the equation. That's why no validation was very hurtful. So it is shifting, but I think everybody, well, I think a lot of people want to be seen by their family and they
Yeah.
want the the milestones in their life celebrated.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that's a unreasonable
No.
request.
Not
No.
at all, Jen. Not at all.
Yeah.
It would be lovely, but you didn't have to think, oh, I
N-
didn't get validated. Look, if it just would be lovely if everyone was on the same page.
yeah.
That thing, there's a distance here between it. There's something is going on that you're not connected. Because
Yeah.
if you were, this would just be, you would just cruise through life and it'll all be good, and everyone would speak their mind and be open. Yeah, but you can see it's like a flu. It's just not validation. It's the whole relationship that's affected,
Yeah.
because
Sure.
somewhere in the background, someone hasn't been telling the truth and being fessing up to what they really feel, and then they hide it in the closet.
Yeah.
And then when someone brings something up, it all goes pear shaped, because
Yeah.
and all this on the defensive stuff comes out. They
I
just
ha-
yeah
yeah.
yeah that's
I
that.
have a feeling that they don't agree with my choices. I think they wanted me to be single for a while after my last marriage ended. And they're not taking into consideration that I was alone in that marriage, like physically, emotionally, spiritually for years. Um, I think there's some, what's the word? Um, I can't think of the word, but they just don't agree with some of my choices. So therefore, I think they're thinking, well, if I don't agree, then I'm not going to celebrate with her. That's how I feel. I don't know if that's the truth. It's how it feels to me.
Sure.
And maybe because they're not as direct as they should be, or maybe not as healthy in their directness about how they actually feel, I wonder if it's a passive aggressive thing. If they're like, well, we're going to show our disapproval by not because they know me, and I think they know that their um, their words mean a lot to me.
I would agree.
So the fact that it's not there, it's very loud.
So Jen, if you role reversed and put yourself in your parents' shoes and throw them into yours and Cripps' shoes, what would you say to yourself and Cripps? What would you, as a parent,
Hmm.
how would this come across?
I could answer. I can answer that one.
Go ahead.
Well, I addressed this with them openly in a conversation when I was around them, and I said, I validated them. I understand the way you're looking at this, and I understand why you would see that it would have been important for Jen to. I mean, this is something that Jen and I talked about ourselves, and I let them know that we had talked about it, and we explained to them the reasons why that Jen made the decision. I gave her the option. I explained to her that I was willing to wait if she wanted to take a year between the two marriages or however long she needed to heal and be by herself for a while. Um, I would have waited for her, and she knew that, and I explained that to them. So I understand the initial reaction, but this has been 2 years ago now. So whatever their feelings were, feeling that it wasn't right or feeling that Jen should have done this or done that, that ship has sailed. So at some point, they have to, in my opinion, they have to get over the fact that we didn't do it the way they thought was best and embrace the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is she did not wait a year, that we did wait 2 years before we got married. We waited 1 year before we got engaged, over a year. So at some point, they have to let go of their disappointment or they're not agreeing with the way things are done and face the reality of what is real now, especially since so much time has gone by already. 2 years, in fact. And frankly, they're not listening, in my opinion, they're not listening to Jen and saying, this has helped me. This is not just me making a stupid decision. Because of the nature of the relationship itself, this has helped me heal. Now, if my son or daughter came to me and I might have misgivings about the way it happened, but I hear my daughter and know that she's been through an abusive relationship and she says, I'm happy and I found someone that is not abusive to me. In fact, they're nurturing. Regardless of whether I agreed or disagreed, I would hope that I would look at the reality of the situation that she's in and be supportive.
Yeah, like the evidence. Look at the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, this isn't the Jen show. Let's move on.
Move on. Yeah, I think that's the way that I would look at it. I understand what you're saying, Glenn, and in answer to what you're saying, I think that if you got to the point where you were self-validating, yes, that would be very helpful for you to not need validation from your parents. However, in terms of your daughter getting married, I think it's pretty typical to have the family be involved and be supportive, regardless of whether they agree with the way it happened or not. To send a card, to post on Facebook, hey, congratulations on your wedding. We're not asking for an all expense paid trip to Hawaii to celebrate the fact that we're getting married. Okay, these are not outrageous expectations. Simply acknowledging that the marriage exists. Okay, the bare bones minimum of human affirmation and validation from a family member would have gone a long way, but we didn't get that and still haven't gotten that. So yeah, I understand why Jen's upset about this. I'm a little upset about it too. But obviously there's nothing we can do about it. We have to move on, and that's what we're trying to do. But it definitely ties into the subject of validation and the fact that she's not getting any. To the point where, Jen just got a promotion on her new job. So she's being validated by the people that she works for more than her own family. And forgive me for saying this, Jen, if this is not something you want to share, but, you were even struggling with whether or not to even tell them about it because they're not going to recognize it because it's not a full-time job with benefits. And that's the only thing they're focused on, that to them, it's not going to be important or celebrated because it's not what they expect that is needed for the situation. So
My mom did congratulate me,
yeah,
which was very sweet of her. And my mom has acknowledged Jason and our wedding, but the rest of the family, not so much. And it is hurtful, but um, we've talked a lot about how stuff like this a lot of times can reflect more on the other person, than it
yeah,
does on you.
yeah.
And that's what I'm realizing right now too is I'm okay, we're happy, we're healthy, and I don't want to hang on to hope anymore if it's not going to come. And I don't want it to rule my life anymore. And this is one of those things with validation when you're expecting it and depending on it from an external source. You're not really in control. When you have the self validation, it's just way more reliable,
Oh yeah,
and more,
yeah,
it can be sturdier. So that's why it's important to learn self validation. So,
yeah. Yeah, like I said, I'm not missing Glenn's point. What he's saying makes sense. Yes, self-validation would set a person up for a situation where instead of looking for that external validation, even from family, and realizing that it's not coming, but to be able to do that for yourself, that would be very helpful. It would be very healing, and then you're not holding on to a false hope. And for me, it does seem like a false hope to get that from someone that's incapable, or at least seemingly incapable of giving you what you need from them.
yeah.
Okay.
Rich,
So
just quickly, can I just add something? Oh, please, if you want.
yeah, of
I'm
course.
just, I'm just thinking that the self-validated person has probably received the self-validation role model from their parents. So it's like a
Yes.
perpetuation. See, this is where it all goes wrong, doesn't it? It just you carry on the cycle, but the healthy parents lead to the healthy kids, and then they bring it to their kids. And you can see here that how difficult it is to break that cycle. As Jen and yourself have mentioned, I mean, it's very explicit that the influence of your parents have had a huge bearing on where you've got to before you've seen the light and attempted to turn it around.
Hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right, we're getting close to the bottom of the hour, so we'll try to move through these a little bit more quickly. The next one is, how does invalidation hurt important relationships? Jen, how does invalidation hurt important relationships? I think that's a great
You
question.
know, Glenn said something earlier in the chat, and I don't remember what the wording was, Glenn, but about it creating a divide. Um,
Yeah,
I can't remember exactly what the term was that you used,
parent
but
child, parent child divide.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think it can cause a division.
Hmm.
Um, and I won't go into details, but my my father slung some insults my way this past weekend. No, a month ago,
Come on.
and I've been kind of processing it. And what it's done for me, because I'm over here thinking I would never say this to my kid. Like I'm so
Right,
flabbergasted.
right.
And there is a part of me that wants to um, react out of anger. There's a part of me that wants to internalize it, like he's telling the truth, but the things he said are not true. They're false. But I don't feel safe with him.
Uh-huh.
The little bit of safety that I had with him was kind of demolished with those comments.
Yeah.
And I love my dad, and I want to have a relationship with him, but I'm in a place now in my life where I don't want to be close with people that are not safe,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and that are not hurting me.
Right.
I've been through a lot of that. So, um, yeah, I think, and what he said was very invalidating, like incredibly.
Yeah.
So, and even invalidating of my reality that I'm living right now, or even my reality of my past. It's very strange. So yeah, it can be a part of its demise. Is that the one that we're on?
Yeah.
Or no, hurting important
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
Um, you know, my relationship with my dad to me is important. He's my dad. I want to be close. I want him to be a safe place for me, and vice versa. Because
Hmm.
I'm an adult child now, and I've always longed, to have adult friendships with my parents.
Sure.
But a lack of validation really, for me, a lack of, I keep going back to these words that Glenn used because for some reason, even now, validation, I'm like, gosh, it doesn't it doesn't seem to fit right. But a lack of acknowledging consideration and encouragement, um, yeah, it can cause a divide. It can definitely help in its demise. Um, so that's my answer.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. Just for the sake of time, I'll agree with what Jen said. I think that it's especially hurtful in important relationships, less so in ones that are, surface or just acquaintance relationships, things like that. But especially with family, these are key people in our lives. These are people that we want to be close to and want them to be happy and involved and things like that. And when they're not, and when there's invalidation, I think it's incredibly devastating. That's all I'll say about that one. What about you, Glenn? How does invalidation hurt important relationships? It maybe at least from the definition that we're focusing in on.
Well, it invalidates the relationship to start with, regardless of how important, whatever level of importance you place on it. I mean, the question I think is, are you prepared to participate in this so-called important relationships while this scenario of invalidation is present? I don't think I would want to.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you, Glenn. And as Jen was saying, she doesn't want to be around people that aren't safe, and that's a decision that she can make as an adult. She
Yep.
can make that decision. It may not be easy, especially if it's family that's involved. It's not an easy thing to separate or divide from family because you don't feel safe. I think it's incredibly sad.
Yeah.
But for the person that's trying to be healthy and they're trying to make decisions that are best for them, it may be the place that you eventually come to, that this is what you need in order for your survival, in order for you to live a healthy existence. That just may be the decision that has to be made. It's just incredibly unfortunate to me, because it would take in my opinion, very little effort for the person to learn to, reach out and just say a few nice things, to say a few affirming words.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that's too difficult. And again, I fully understand that maybe they didn't get that growing up either, but I didn't get it growing up, and I'm not a father, but I already know that if I am blessed with children, I will make it important uh, to
And
have.
you're an amazingly affirming husband.
Oh, thank you.
So
Aw, thank you.
you're welcome, welcome, welcome.
Okay, next one. How does it affect its growth, or how does it help its demise?
I kind of answered that one.
Okay, what is invalidation abuse?
Yeah, this is an important one. And I was trying to find that printout of different examples as to what that looks like. But a few examples is when people say, you're too sensitive,
Oh
or
yeah,
it wasn't that bad,
yeah.
or don't you think you're blowing this out of proportion? Stop being so dramatic.
Hmm.
You cry too much.
Right.
Stuff like that. It's a couple of examples.
Yeah, you're overreacting.
And yeah, that's another one. And how, like, do you have some examples for actions, like invalidating actions? I was trying to think of a couple. Um, Not congratulating your daughter and son-in-law on their wedding.
Right. I mean,
That's kind of words and actions, but I was thinking more of words than actions.
well, if we had had a traditional wedding, it's people not even bothering to show up. I mean,
Yeah, that could be an example.
that would be invalidating. Um, Not being there for family stuff, for important family things. I don't know. It's harder to think of many more examples.
Well, yeah, and like the absence of encouragement,
Yeah,
consideration, acknowledging.
yeah.
That would
To me,
definitely be up there.
yeah. To me, it's just not. It's non-existent, uh, non-existent stuff.
Yeah.
What about you, Glenn? Any opinion on what is invalidation abuse?
Oh, that's a toughie. That's a tough one. I'm just trying to think of an example. What is it? They're sort of together, because
Yeah.
invalidation in many respects is abuse.
Right.
So I I just don't know that the term is relevant. I just say it's invalidation personally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything that
Yeah.
would be invalidating.
Yes, I do. I don't think use. I think it's implied that it can be abusive
Yeah.
without actually saying it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right. What is self-validation and how can that be used when we've experienced a lack of validation by key people in our lives? We're almost to the end, guys. This is an important one. What is self-validation and how can that be used when we've experienced a lack of validation by key people in our lives?
Um, well, gosh, I'll share real quick.
Okay.
This sounds very new age, and it's not at all, actually, and I'll explain it so people don't freak out. When you get into researching abusive situations or narcissism, stuff like this, there's a term called shadow work, and the what it is looking at yourself and recognizing the things. Well, it talks about how when you're born, when you're a small child, that you're born whole in the sense of um, having all these personality traits and the way you look and all that kind of stuff. You're born and you exist.
The way you express your emotions too.
Yeah, and when you start seeing your family and your parents and people reacting off of who you are in that state, that whole state, or just even in yourself being fully accepting of yourself as a kid as much as you can be, um, you're setting aside things that you're seeing people are reacting to. Whether it's you're not allowing yourself to get angry because your parents get angry when you get angry, or you're setting aside joy or laughing because your parents are reacting to it,
Hmm.
or a caregiver is reacting to it.
Hmm.
Um, it's pretty amazing because you start realizing, even as an adult, when you're looking back at the things the parts of you that you set aside to placate your caregivers at a very young age. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but
Yeah, I'm understanding
um,
what you're saying.
so self validating, I think, for me at least, has been recognizing the things that I have set aside and pushed out of my view,
Hmm.
um, parts of my personality, parts of who I am that I have
Hmm.
set aside to please other people,
Yeah.
and pulling those things back into the picture. Remembering parts of myself, and remembering how much I love art and that I want to do it more. And remembering, I mean, even after I left my ex, like I hardly ever laughed. I had set aside laughing because it got on his nerves,
Yeah.
and I
Yawning.
was yawning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would hide yawning. Like it's just the craziest stuff.
Yep.
So self-validation, even on my own journey today, like working through this today and journaling with it and stuff, is huge in looking back at the things that you've set aside about your personality and who you are to placate an abusive person or people. But it might not even be abusive people, actually. I think sometimes when people get stuck in people pleasing, this can happen too. When you're so concerned about pleasing other people that you start erasing yourself, um, to please someone else or to make
Sure.
yourself less noticeable. So for me, yeah, self validation can be used when you've experienced a lack of validation by key people in our lives. That's what's been helping me, is almost like rediscovering myself, even
Hmm.
the childlike parts of myself, because I think
Sure.
I even tamped down um, the childlike parts of me when I was a child.
Yeah.
My imagination, my daydreaming, just things like that, because it really ticked my dad off sometimes. And I didn't want him to be angry. I felt responsible for his anger.
Right.
I felt like I had to, what is the word? Not validate, but regulate. I felt like I had to regulate the emotions in our household. I felt responsible for that. And
Well,
so that's
sure.
been really, really helpful for me in self validating.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. What is self-validation and how can it be used when we experience lack of validation in key people? Yeah, self-validation is realizing that from the key people that we know, we did not get it, so we have to do it for ourselves. This is just part of being a healthy adult and being authentic with yourself. As Glenn has pointed out, learning not to expect it from the outside. I think that's a great goal. I'm not saying I'm fully there. I mean, in getting married, I mean, my family was a little bit more forthcoming with congratulations, things like that. It was a little odd because of the whole COVID thing, and so it was different. And I recognize that because of the situation going on in the world, it wasn't a traditional thing. So I give grace in that area. But for me in my relationship with Jenn and getting my own validation, self-validating, and also getting validation from her, that's really all I need, honestly. If I never get validation from my family, and I mean this sincerely, I'm going to be okay. I have what I need. I have what is helping me live, not just survive, but live and thrive and grow and change with another person that loves me and that I love. Um, that's a great gift, and I don't think a lot of people get that. So uh, the key people in my life, do I wish that they would validate? Yes, but I have to learn to do it for myself because there's such a deficiency and a lack there. Glenn, you're up on this one. Then we have one more question to answer.
Couple of things. Well, as you said, I agree with, and we reiterated, is that it's self-validating to not rely on other people to validate you. That's number one.
I like it.
Well, it is, yeah. But number two is, I think it's where you turn a negative into a positive. In other words, you reject the invalidation. You do not allow people
I
to
like that.
abuse you. You do not sort of react and get all upset and angry when people lay shit on you, because they win. What happens to you? You, all it does is take you down the drain. In other words, you take the high ground and you rise above it, and by doing so, you can, and our perpetual process, you can just continue self-validation because you're not going to accept other people's shit.
Right.
Simple as that. That's my answer.
Okay. Well,
It's a good
any
answer.
comment on that, Jenn?
I think it's a great idea. And you're right. And yeah, like I said before, about it being more about the other person um, than you, because you know yourself. You're like, hey, yeah, rising above, not letting it get to you. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I think it's a great goal.
Yeah.
It may
Love
not be
working
as
on it.
it may not be as easy as just saying it, but I do agree with the necessity of it that Glenn's saying. I agree 100%. Lastly, if we are a believer, how does God validate us? Great question. You want to take that one first, Jenn? If we're a believer, how does God validate us?
Gosh, so many different ways.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'll say the obvious. Sending his son Jesus
Hmm.
is very validating. It shows acknowledging us, consideration of our salvation,
Hmm.
encouragement in many ways.
Sure.
And, kind of like in an everyday sense, when you feel God's presence, when you're praying with, to him and just talking to him, um, even in my journey of healing, I do believe that God has put things in my path that have helped me heal, including you, including Glenn. Um, and I feel seen. I feel
Hmm.
like my pain has been seen and things I've gone through have been seen. And he was there with me then, but especially right now in this journey of healing, um, his hand is very prominent
Hmm.
and guiding and loving. And it's just been quite the experience healing. Um, it's been
Yeah.
really, really hard, but his love
Yeah.
and his grace and his comfort and his peace, it's wonderful.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my answer.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Jenn. I would agree that the most obvious is that sending his son to save us and um, to desire a relationship with us. The Bible
Yes.
makes it very clear that he wants to know us and for us to know him. And the Bible is not just a rule book. In fact, the rule portion of it is really a short section of the Bible, and it was for the purpose of the Hebrew people, and also explaining us to us the necessity in the eyes of a perfect God of how difficult it would be to try to do that as imperfect humans without the help, without His help. So him knowing that and setting up the parameters by which we're judged, knowing that we can't do it, to love us enough to send His own Son to do what we couldn't do. To me, that's the most validation that He could ever give, to know that we have enough value that He would do that for us. I don't think there's a better way to validate that. And to tie it into what Glenn said, there's a verse in Romans 5. It says, "Better love hath no man than he that would lay down his life for a friend." Now, He calls us friends, and He calls us, we're His sheep. He's the great shepherd. He calls us his brothers. We're joint heirs with Christ. But He laid down His life for us. That's the most full and all encompassing expression of love and validation, tied in the way to express love in a way that's greater than anything else that you could experience. I mean, put it in real terms. Someone, you're out somewhere and you get robbed and gunpoint or whatever, and someone lunges forward and tries to get the gun away from the guy, and he ends up getting killed. God forbid. But if that were to happen and you ended up being able to run away and survive, how much love would you feel from that person? I mean, it's it's the greatest thing that any person could do. Now, we would hope in our human relationships that wouldn't be necessary, but I see it as God working with us in our lives, loving us, walking this path in a broken, fallen world with us. Um, that every day of that to me is validation. Every day of that, and learning and growing and having Him show His love toward me is daily validation. That's my answer to that one. And Glenn, I know this is going to be a little bit different for you, so you can swap the word God with universe or however you want to answer it. But the question is, how does God or universe validate us?
I'd have to think on that one, so I'm going to pass.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, that's it. That's the broadcast for validation for tonight. Guys, we appreciate you sticking around so long. We've had up and down a little bit, but we've had pretty much the same amount of viewers the whole entire show. So you've stayed with us for just over 2.5 hours, and we just can't tell you how much we appreciate that. Appreciate the same people coming in.
What?
Matthias just popped in. He says, "I want to validate Glenn, Jen, and Jason, and that you guys just had a wonderful stream. God bless you all, and have a blessed and productive upcoming week." Thank you, thank you, Matthias.
Thanks, Matthias.
Yeah, that's good. Janet says, "Back at you, Matthias." Goodbye. Yeah, that's great. That's very timely. I see Torben. I didn't see you till just now, so welcome. We're glad that you're here. Thank you. He says, I think I try that one with crying, trying to manipulate. I just start crying and crying. Oh, okay.
I don't think you got it because we were talking about people claiming that some girls are manipulating with the crying.
Oh, that's for sure.
You're crying to control me, and I was letting Jalen know that I've had that said to me. You're crying to manipulate me.
Yeah.
I guess Torben's gonna try it now.
Just so you know, just so everybody knows that I would never react that way. In fact, when you cry, I think it's expressing your feelings, and It's incredibly meaningful
Yeah.
that you feel safe enough to be able to do that. So,
It's a show of intimacy. It's
yeah.
being very vulnerable with somebody. Let them see you cry.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we've highlighted validation and discussed the importance of it in relationships and for ourselves, next week we move on to the topic of narcissism by request. So see you next week. All right. Again, thank you for being a part of tonight's broadcast, and thank you for hanging in there with us for so long. We hope everyone's year is going well so far. Hope the rest of your week goes well. This upcoming week, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr.'s day. So, if you celebrate that or don't celebrate it, I hope that it's a good day off for you. I know Jen has to work, and so I'm grateful that she has work to go to. That's great.
Yes.
So have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. And again, if you have any ideas and topics, just like person who wanted us to talk about narcissism, and we're grateful for that request. And we definitely want to talk about what you guys want to hear us discuss. So you can send any responses if anything you want us to make a subject here on True Story Live. My email that you can send it to is truestorylive.crips@gmail.com. And again, if you want to send something to Glenn or Jen, then you can just put that in the subject line, and I'll make sure and forward that to them. We appreciate you again, and we will see everyone next week. Until then, good night and God bless. Oh, I didn't ask you. Say good night to the people, Glenn. Sorry.
Good night. See you later.
All right.
I didn't know you had a holiday, but obviously it doesn't apply to me. But
No.
Nope.
I'll be digging weeds.
Yeah, everybody pray for Glenn's back and that he doesn't get bit by a brown snake while he's out there working on
Yeah,
the.
no brown snakes.
If I do, I won't be on next week's show.
Don't get chased by a brown snake. My gosh, those
Oh,
things.
Don't give me the visual imagery thing.
Give me the willies. Ah.
Okay,
Say
good
good
night.
night. Good night. Thanks, Glenn. Say good night to the people, Jen.
Good night, guys. Thank you for hanging in there. I was reading the I'm like, wow, I broke out the machine gun
It was great.
questionnaire. I could hear
No,
the
they were
like,
great. They
machine
were
gun
great
noise in my
questions.
head.
You did a fantastic job, Jen.
Thank you for the validation. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And thank you guys for hanging in there and being with us tonight. And these are they can be very sensitive topics, obviously. But we appreciate you guys diving into it with us very much.
Yeah, we sure do. All right, that's it for us tonight. Like I said, until next week, good night and God bless. Thanks for